Let me introduce some very, very distinguished panelists today. I should say at the outset that one of the panelists is going to escape a little early at 3:25. But the three panelists are I'll call them out one at a time, is the Minister of Commerce and Industry of Malaysia, Mustapa, Mohamed, Minister of Trade of New Zealand, Tim Groser, and Deputy USTR Ambassador Demetrios Marantis. The rapporteur is John Phipps, who's the Senior Director of Global Government Relations for Visa. So if I can ask all of you to be, and I'm going to out Demetrios as the guy who is going to leave 5 minutes early. Thanks. Well, I think a lot of us are interested in generally knowing, sort of one by one, how TPP is going. How it relates to services, where we're moving from here, concerns that you might have, signs of optimism, signs of pessimism. Where's it going? What's the next step? And how can we help?
Thank you, Charles. Thank you for this opportunity. Let me begin by introducing myself. I come from Malaysia. Malaysia is part of ASEAN. ASEAN is 10 countries. We've got 580 million people in ASEAN. We have opened up trade in ASEAN in goods and services now. We opened up the service sector. We decided to open up 128 service sectors by the year 2015. And by the year 2015, we will have an ASEAN economic community. So that's this process of opening up, which has been on track within 10 countries in South Asia. And secondly, a few words about Malaysia, my country. We have been a beneficiary of this open trading regime. We have been a beneficiary of exporting our services. We are not exporter of services, although most of that is tourism receipts. But our entrepreneurs have gone out in banking, in healthcare, in construction, to many parts of Asia in particular. So Malaysia is supportive of this initiative to liberalize services. APEC is another initiative that we are quite active in. But beyond that, as you asked me to say a few words about TPP, we have expressed our interest to our friends in New Zealand and US to be part of this exciting process. Asia Pacific is moving very fast. China, of course, is expanding rapidly, and we firmly believe that as a small, open economy, we could benefit from a more open trade regime. For that reason, we hope to be able to come on board very soon. And services, of course, going to figure quite prominently in these discussions. There's some challenges. We've been sharing these challenges with our partners, New Zealand, Australia, and America. But we believe, on balance, we are going to be a beneficiary. And within services, there will be a number of priorities. Of course, developed members of TPP would want to push certain sectors. Malaysia, from our point of view, would have our own interest. From the developed country point of view, we have been informed that financial services will be top of the agenda, and we'll be engaging with our partners in this. So going forward, yes, there are many challenges in coming on board on TPP, but we believe the benefits will outweigh the downside, and we have decided a few months ago to come fully on board on TPP. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Is that working, everyone? Hear me? Great. Look, thank you very much indeed for this opportunity to speak to friends here. I want to make some comments generally about services first in the WTO context as much as the TPP, because frankly, I think our approach to this informs both of those sets of negotiations. And let me start by multilateralizing a mea culpa I made last night at dinner. If you're going to confess, you must confess to the largest number of people. If you take someone like me who's been immersed in goods negotiations for a quarter of a century, I was our chief negotiator in the Uruguay round, and then I was chairman of the agriculture negotiations for a couple of years until I went into politics. So I've been sort of very much your traditional goods negotiator, and I passionately believe in it. I think it's really important and still see scope for that traditional negotiation. But if you ask me, did I get it on services? I think the answer is no. And I'm starting to get it. And I'd say for three reasons. First of all, I don't think I got it in terms of the relative significance of this from a purely macroeconomic point of view. And some of the estimates, I think Dr. Evanson, our new Australian colleagues, put an interesting set of data on the table, something like estimated gains in Australian dollars. Let's take a look, shave 10-15% off for US dollars, something like $100 billion a year for developed countries, double that perhaps for developing countries, potential gains. And I don't think people like me who've been immersed in goods really understood the dimension of this, even though we understood that it was the 70% of our domestic economies. Nor do I think we got it in terms of the negotiating process. And here I'd be a little kinder on myself and on other people, because I still think this is a formidable challenge. If you look back on the history of the early rounds in terms of goods, even though there was a high level of consensus underwriting what they were doing, which was a limited negotiation involving essentially industrial goods only, having excised all sensitive products to the then major developed countries. Nevertheless, the request and offer procedure there got superseded by the need for formulae. And that's when they started to make significant broader progress. And I think people like me coming from that side of the shop have struggled to work out how you negotiate, and also struggled to make any political assessment of what is going on inside the services negotiation. That's reason number two. And my third reason is, I think until relatively recently, outside a bunch of specialists who focused on services, people like me have not understood how the edges of the goods services divide have become blurred. And increasingly, as we slice and dice the global supply chain, how important that blurring has become. So I think it's really, I would say only in the last few years have I sort of started to understand that the delivery of goods and investment is itself conditional on high levels of service access. And I think while you can say, well, this is very general, well, in my experience, the start of any technically coherent result actually is based on a political appreciation of the importance of it. So I think this realization is beginning to spread even to people like me, okay? And I think we've got to raise our game here. This is clear. A word or two about the process. As I was arguing last night with the famous, the veteran EU ambassador Paul Train used to say to me when I was sort of learning the trade many years ago, don't decry arguments about procedure, they always mask an argument of substance. And how true that comment from Paul was. So I think we have got not a good process underway inside the WTO. I sense from the comments that Anand Sharma, let me just say what a tremendous degree of leadership we're now seeing out of the Indian government under his leadership. I think he's dead right. It's time to put away the strict sequencing provisions of the Hong Kong deal. Heavens alive, that was 5 years ago. We've got to move that. I don't think we need to move it explicitly, as I was arguing to some friends last night. I think it can be done without a full frontal ideological attack, which is unlikely to work. I think there's now a sufficient convergence underlying countries' assessments that this sort of rigid lockstep process simply is going to deliver us the goods. No pun intended. Well, maybe it is a deliberate pun when I think about it, because one implication of modulating the strict sequencing issue is precisely to deliver the goods chapter. I mean, it's quite clear now, I think, to an increasing number of ministers, and I hope their senior officials and ambassadors, that whereas the original political logic forced on people in Hong Kong was to try and put maximum pressure to get modalities